This is the new Lamborghini Aventador Ultimae, and it's a very sad day indeed, as the traditional V12 engine from a Lamborghini approaches the end of the road. But what a way to go. The Ultimae is the most powerful non-hybrid Lambo ever. It's one of the best too, and here's why. The raw approval purebred V12 begins way before the moment it barks into life. If you've ever been the one to turn the key or press the button, you'll know the mix of excitement that fizzles through your guts. Likewise, the adrenaline that sparks around your central nervous system when you squeeze the throttle. A driving experience of more mortal machinery. Uncorking a V12 is something you never forget and will never get enough of. And here's a quick history lesson. Lamborghini knows this better than anyone. Even better, dare I say it, than Ferrari. Both company founders understood that having V12 engines with their name cast proudly in the cam covers best showed their cars with status. Technical power, abstract performance. Over the past 75 years since Mr. Ferrari set up shop, and almost 60 years ago since Mr. Lamborghini did the same in order to build better road cars than Enzo's epic 12-cylinder engines. Ferrari famously channeled its company's effects for immortality through racing achievements, in which Ferrari road cars have that of a racing feel. Lamborghini wisely swerved motor racing, but not only did this first effect in the gorgeous 350 GT of 1964 feature of a V12 designed by the brightest engineers of their era, but just 2 years later he effectively innovated the mid-engine supercar with the iconic, sensational Miura. Ferrari fought back over the decades, but Lamborghini kept going, as its exotics with an unbroken bloodline that continued with the Diablo, Murcielago all the way to today's Aventador. These are difficult times for the supercar makers. The days of Mr. Ferrari and Mr. Lamborghini went long ago, but the party they started has lasted for generations. In fact, it wasn't until the last handful of years that time was called and car makers faced planning for a full electronic future. Most will cling onto the piston engines for a while via the adaptation of some form of plug-in hybrid systems. E-fuel could yet throw internal combustion engines a lifeline, but with so much at stake, car companies, even legendary Italian ones, cannot rely on some of the last-second salvation for internal combustion engines. So what does this mean for Lamborghini? Well, as soon as next year, we should see an all-new Aventador replacement featuring a plug-in hybrid V12 powertrain system. This will be closely followed by the current PHEV Huracan and Urus replacements. After that, Lamborghini has its first fully electric model planned, and likely to break cover before 2030. The party's not over quite yet though, as evidenced by the Aventador Ultimae. As it suggests, this is something for the pure shock and awe petrol-powered Lamborghini flagship. As you might expect, it has proved popular. So popular in fact that all 600 cars divided between the 350 coupes and 250 of the Roadster have already been sold, with the basic price of these cars starting at $324,000. Give yourself a pat on the back if you're one of those lucky 600 to get your hands on this new Lambo. The Aventador has been around for a while, but it's still a startling sight. With over 2 meters in width, it's every bit the bedroom poster car. Clipped off the wilder track focus SVJ's Aggression Aero Kit, there's no ALA active aerodynamics, but this somehow leads the Ultimae more old school appeal. Impossibly dramatic, but spared the try-hard visual risks of a race car. Its clean lines show the impact of this incredible piece of sculpture. The Ultimae is a perfect example, as its heart is the evolution of the SVJs. We can see the 6.5 litre 48-valve V12. With 769 brake horsepower and 531 pound-feet of torque, it adds 10 extra horsepower to the SVJ's tally, making it the most potent Aventador of all, and the most powerfully naturally aspirated Lamborghini ever too. Just weighing in at 1,600 kg and a top speed of 220 miles an hour, it will do 0 to 62 miles an hour in just 2.9 seconds. Mating the V12 is a familiar single clutch, 7-speed paddle shift gearbox and all-wheel drive. Suspension in favour of a milder setup mirroring that of the Aventador S. All things are relative in mind. So this still means super trick push rod suspension, with adaptive dampeners, driver selectable dynamic modes, plus the stiff carbon monarchy and massive carbon brakes that make the Aventador such a leap over the steel-framed Murcielago it replaced in 2011. Much as Lamborghini understands the magic of a V12, it consistently nails the joy of supercar doors. If you don't beam with childish gleam when you tuck your fingers into the hidden release button and pull the scissor door skywards, then you really don't deserve your shot behind the wheel. It's actually easier to drop into the cockpit than you might imagine, though managing it in one smooth motion. However, it does require a bit of practice and some well-oiled hips. Once in, you're treated to one of the greatest driving views. The impossible racked windscreen, arched back for miles, and the vast dashboard, seemingly pushing you way back into the cockpit. You sit low, but because the screen is so vast and the shallow seats, you still get a nice view of the sharp creases that mark the top of the front wheel arches. Likewise, the side windows start higher at your shoulders, but cut low into the doors as they dive towards the mirrors. So forward and visibility isn't as restrictive as you may think. Those endless A-pillars can make spotting apexes difficult, but it's the kind of blindage you'll be prepared to live with if it means a car can look as crazy as this one. Glancing in your side mirrors are those rear thighs of this car, swallowing to cover the fabulous wide rear wheels. You don't quite feel like you're sitting at the pointy end of a narrowhead as you did in a Diablo, but it's still one amazing machine to thread through a gasp. You might be inclined to laugh at the missile launch button style starter, complete with its red flip-up guard, but it's a bit of fun and certainly doesn't diminish the feeling of the excitement every time you press it. The starter motor spins with a churn up before those 12 cylinders fire in turn. Then initially a whoop of revs, quickly setting into a busy motion of the pistons and pulleys and a rush of spent fuel. Mounted just behind your back, the Aventador's motor is a greater character than the front-mounted Ferrari V12. It has greater presence, overlaid with the kind of searing response to throttle inputs that makes your palms sweat with anticipation. Dab the brake, flex your right fingers to pull back on the long-eared shift paddle, squeeze the throttle, and away you go. For starters, don't be tempted to let it do its own thing at low speeds. For the upshifts, are strangely hesitant in auto. Better to bat up and down through the gears manually for a much improved shift quality. And if you're driving with wider throttle opens, a fractional lift as you flip from the next gear works wonders. A double clutch box is unfailingly praised, but while it can be junky and frustrating at times, we can say though the challenge of doing your bit to help the Ultimae's gearbox shift more sweetly can be really satisfying. It's refined in the way it covers the ground. There's a maturity to the way it rounds off that makes it a pleasure to glide. And though compared to its full crying Corsa or Ego modes, engine has made an epic sense of power without breaking sweat. There's little need to stray beyond sport mode, brings as much firmness to the suspension as is useful on a real road surface. In many ways, this is the unsung thrill of driving a car like the Aventador. Yes, of course, we all love the idea of yelping along at nearly 9,000 RPM, but these big V12s haven't always been bombastic blabbermouths. Sometimes to truly appreciate the true scale of the car's performance, you need to make impressive progress while using a small fraction of its potential. Like an active volcano, while a whisper of smoke crawls from the cone, you don't need a full-scale eruption to be awed by what the Aventador has at its disposal. First surprise is just how weirdly this Aventador feels. Yes, it's wide enough that you can breathe in when a car comes your way, but in terms of pure replaceability, you can pretty much smack the Ultimae's noise into any apex with a pinpoint accuracy. There's a megaton of grip with traction to match, but this won't be wasted if you don't have the confidence to exploit it. Of course, it takes a while to really lean on this new Lambo's grip. Likewise, squeeze into the available traction, but with every turn you begin to sense that this is a car that demands respect but does nothing to intimidate you. Key to this is the steering, which is quick yet calm with a response that considers your input. Thanks to the nicely jarred rear wheel steering, you never feel you need to introduce more energy with a speedier than usual steering input. Yet nor do you find yourself nibbling away at the corner because you've got more response than you wanted. It's unlikely you'll ever work beyond the grip of the front or rear axle, more than briefly, at least on the road. But if you do manage to heel it into a corner with enough pace, it feels remarkably natural. With its low-mounted motor, the Aventador somewhat shows the physics of the Diablo or Murcielago being worked hard through a series of corners. I'm trying to imagine how the McLaren 765 LT would compare to this car. If you haven't done already, you can check out my review of the McLaren 765 LT in the pop-out tab in the right corner now. With a quicker, sharper and lighter on its feet, certainly, but the glorious Google-eyed way in which all missiles fly, this has never felt more repayable for the missing 4 cylinders, lack of the absolute throttle response, and a somewhat industrial soundtrack. This Lamborghini offers what all Lambo flagships have to offer, the full IMAX supercar experience. The reach and intensity of the Ultimate's powertrain has to be felt and heard, to be believed. On roads like these, it takes a joint effort and a hard swallow to chase the red line in 3rd gear. Often your brain is telling you that's enough, but when you glance at the dial revs, you've got another 2,000 RPM to go. The 1990s might have called wanting its upshifts back, but in some ways, each brutal pause punch offers a split second in which to gather your thoughts and steal a breath. It would be easier to forgive if only it didn't make the car stumble at critical moments. Downshifts are far more pleasing, not least because you get a whop of revs and an explosion of pops and bangs as you stand the Lambo on its pointy nose under heavy braking. The carbon discs and huge calipers look amazing set behind the spidey spokes of the alloy wheels. Braking feels genuinely good in this car, which makes them easy to adjust despite a little more internal travel than you'd like. Big stops are almost as physical as full acceleration. If you were inclined to make like Bob Wallace and go in the search of a front end lift, you'll have no worries stopping for the toll booths. It's not a full-blown fade, but more like a combination of heat build-up and possible paddle knockoff due to the rough nature of some of the tarmac. But it does serve to remind us that even the best modern braking systems have their limits. Though it marks a moment in automotive history, among us hoping this would never come, there's nothing sadder than the new Aventador Ultimae. It's a celebration towards a breed of cars that has delighted our lives for generations. As such, it embodies the unique wonder from which Lamborghini always fashioned its uniquely special machines. It's unlikely we'll see anything like this again, but Mr. Lamborghini's legacy will help us through whatever the future holds.